Hey, welcome back, everybody. Happy Thursday. Hope we're having a wonderful first day of August. And let me tell you, things have gotten crazy pretty quickly here in the world of weather, specifically the tropics, where much of July outside of Barrel, we were quiet. Now we're looking at a potential system here that we've been tracking for a couple of days, but the models have really been struggling with. But some of our models are showing a high end potential with this storm that could bring impacts. Or I really will just say it will bring impacts. It's a matter of what impacts will it bring to portions of the United States. So again, going to cover all of that in today's video for you. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Also like the video and comment. Let me know where you're watching from. That really helps me kind of know exactly what regions to forecast for in these videos. And again, that's something that just really helps out a lot. So please do that if you are willing. Now, another thing I will mention is I will be live tonight at 6:45 p.m. Eastern Time here on this channel. So a great way to get notified by that is when you subscribe, hit that little bell next to the subscribe button, and that will notify you when I go live with an update tonight where I will be answering your questions, again, on what will likely be potential Debbie here on down the road. So again, going to do all of that here. It's going to be an active month. It's going to be a busy one. And I'm here for you in this active time. So again, with all of that said, I think we're good to go ahead and start talking about that forecast here because again, like I mentioned, things have gotten a little crazy here. So we'll go ahead and start by looking at satellite imagery. And here is what, again, is just an open tropical wave right now. Currently no name. It's not even really an invest yet, but it is an area to watch from the National Hurricane Center. And what a couple days ago looked like this might just be something that kind of forms here near the Bahamas and then curls out to sea has changed pretty quickly into something that is very likely going to end up here in the Gulf of Mexico just off the coast of Florida. And what happens after that is still a big question mark. But some of our models do strengthen this into a notable system. And some bring, some big time impacts due to the storm stalling. So again, a lot to figure out here, but know that while this system could be limited in some ways, I think no matter what, we're going to see impacts in the state of Florida and probably even Georgia and likely the Carolinas, even if that's just in the form of rain and rough seas. That right now looks to be the bare minimum. But again, higher end impacts are possible, and I'll show you some of those models here in just a moment. But the latest from the National Hurricane Center here, again, gives this still a 60% chance of developing in the next 7 days, now up to a 20% chance of developing in the next 48 hours. And you might be wondering, well, why exactly haven't the odds necessarily gone up here? And it's not because we don't think that the storm will form. It's more just the models are still kind of fighting it out over exactly when and where it will form. And again, I'll show you that in a second here when we break down model by model. But again, National Hurricane Center is very closely monitoring this, as of course am I, as a storm system, again, likely to get into the Gulf of Mexico within the next couple of days. And obviously, anytime you have a storm in the Gulf in the month of August, you're going to want to watch it, no matter what the models say or what really anybody says. It's just, kind of a smart move here. And of course, again, we will do so for you here. Now, taking a look at some of the latest model guidance, I'm going to go ahead and just start this with a couple of disclaimers. One, this is not a forecast. What I'm about to show you is not set in stone. It's not exactly what's going to happen, but rather it's tools that we use to kind of see, are the models agreeing? What direction are they swaying? And how well are they handling the storm here? And currently, again, the models have been fighting it out, but I will say I think we're closer to a consensus than we were maybe 48 hours ago, even if the models still are kind of bickering a little bit, and I'll show you why I think that is. But we're going to start with the GFS model. This is the American model, and I'll be the first one to tell you, a couple days ago, I was, telling people, I don't think this model is doing a very good job, but here we are now, and I'm starting to rethink that a little bit. Which is a very important tool when forecasting. You got to know when you're wrong and when to change teams here. And I'm kind of leaning a little bit more towards the American now, just because it stuck to its guns with this idea of the storm getting into the Gulf when every other model said it's not happening. And now, all the other models have flip-flopped to the GFS. Also, to the GFS's credit, it has had a pretty good track record over the past year or two here in the tropics. So, credit to the GFS where credit is due. And we'll go ahead and take a look at it. Now, all the models I show you are going to start Friday afternoon, August 2nd. So, again, just moving this about 24 hours ahead of where we are. And all the models are also going to start with the same general picture of an open wave here over Cuba and the southern Bahamas that is slowly working towards the Gulf of Mexico. So, nice and easy, starting picture here for you. Just look where the circle is anytime I change models, and that's where the open wave is at that point in time. But we'll move this ahead. Latest GFS here. This is straight from this morning, so this is again about as new of a model as we can get. And here we go. Low pressure forms and closes itself off here into a defined low this weekend, sometime Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening, just offshore of the Keys and north of Cuba here. Just southwest of the Fort Myers area there, which I know is all too familiar with tropical systems, and then strengthens it and rides it up the west coast of Florida, getting it to tropical storm strength by Sunday morning. We've got a 998 millibar low just offshore of Tampa Bay, and this is only, again, 4 days away. Today's Thursday, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or not even 4 days, 3 days away. Again, we're getting close here. So anytime we get the model showing things like this close to the potential development time, you're going to want to pay attention here. But again, a tropical storm here Sunday morning, continuing to strengthen, likely up to hurricane status on the GFS, and then brings this into the Big Bend of Florida. Again, impacts would be obviously, I don't want to say super big, but this would bring impacts nonetheless towards really much of the Florida Peninsula, as you'd be on that right-hand side of the storm really the entire time. And again, this brings that landfall Sunday afternoon and evening into the Big Bend of Florida, and then moves it inland up near the Florida-Georgia line there, up towards Macon and Savannah, weakens it obviously as it's over land back into a tropical storm, but then Monday afternoon brings this back out over the Atlantic just offshore of Savannah and Charleston. Again, would bring that onshore flow here towards those areas, and eventually continues to just kind of stall out and meander just offshore of South Carolina and Georgia, re-strengthening back into a hurricane Tuesday and into Wednesday, and then hooking it back inland towards Georgia and Florida as, again, a hurricane once again, and a pretty strong hurricane, and then finally, just dies out a little bit, although meanders over land, and again brings its own flooding threats and likely severe weather risks for a couple of days. So again, that's just one model run. I don't want you to take that to heart and think that that's absolutely what's going to happen. In fact, I'll show you a different model now that is the other kind of big model here, the European model, and you'll notice pretty quickly things are going to be very different. But starting at the same time, Friday afternoon, again, here's that wave over Cuba and the Bahamas, bringing rain, bringing stormy weather, bringing rough seas, rip current concerns, but eventually, again, gets this area into the Gulf here over the weekend. Now, up to this point, they look pretty similar. Saturday morning, an area of low pressure is trying to form just north of Cuba, just offshore of southwest Florida. And eventually here, what happens with the European is the storm just kind of meanders here for a little bit in the Gulf, and then nothing. You'll notice nothing happens. We'll move this further ahead into time. If anything, maybe at the end here, it tries to, again, it just meanders for so long. It tries to form into something into the Gulf here about a week or so from now. But again, still just sits there as it's caught with a lack of flow. So again, very different than the GFS model, obviously. But it's a solution that I don't think is necessarily very likely. In fact, I think as many of you who have lived in the Gulf states long enough know, if any storm gets trapped in the Gulf for any extended amount of time, it's likely that some sort of development is going to occur at the very least. So again, but just to show you, very different than the GFS. So we still have disagreement among our operational models, and we'll show you the ensembles as well here in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at some other models. We'll take a look at the Canadian. It's done an all right job with the storm system. Again, there it is over Cuba. The Bahamas, again, bringing those rough seas and rain and stormy weather over, again, the island of Cuba, much of the Bahamas, even South Florida by tomorrow evening and into Saturday here. Then the Canadian develops this low pressure, much like the GFS, into a tropical storm, rides it up the west coast of Florida, albeit a little bit further offshore, and then brings it inland as a strong tropical storm or weak hurricane into the panhandle of Florida, and then up inland into Georgia and the Carolinas, and then again kind of tries to bring it right back out to sea over the Outer Banks there. So again, another different model run, although a little bit closer to the GFS for sure. Again, takes that track up shore, strengthens it, brings it inland, and then tries to meander it east a little bit, although struggles to get quite as offshore as the GFS was here. But either way, that would bring widespread impacts into the southeast from flooding concerns, probably some tornado concerns, obviously with a remnant tropical low, and some onshore flow for extended periods of time as well. So impacts would be felt with that solution as well, even if not quite as strong as the GFS model was. All right, another model here I'll show you is the European AI model. Now, this is a newer model that was just recently developed, kind of with the big AI craze that we've had over the past year or so. It's, again, in that European family, but different, and forms its own storm here. So we'll bring this ahead. Again, there's that low pressure in the Gulf of Mexico, just like all of our models are showing now. And then the AI European here, or European AI, develops it into a weak storm or a tropical depression, brings it into the panhandle of Florida, but then stalls it out. Again, a lot of the models showing this idea of a storm meandering and stalling out, and then just kind of loops it around the Gulf Coast of Florida for a little bit, for a couple of days, really. In fact, I'll back it up. This is Monday. This is Thursday. This is Friday. It's still within 100 miles of where it was 5 days previous. Again, as it gets trapped kind of in a lack of steering currents, and then eventually slowly meanders its way inland into the southeastern United States. So a different solution a little bit, again, but they're all kind of showing the same idea. As you'll notice here, we get a storm, it gets into the Gulf. Most of them develop it into at least a tropical storm, make landfall somewhere in North Florida from the Big Bend to the Panhandle, and then after that, all bets are kind of off. Does it kind of meander back into the Atlantic and re-strengthen? Does it meander just inland a little bit and just bring some flooding concern? Or does it kind of do something in between here? Obviously, the models are differing here. But again, same general idea, at least for most of them. All right, next model I'm going to show you is the NavGem, or the Navy model. After this, then we'll look at some ensembles and then some steering currents, and then we'll take a look at least the impacts that we feel confident in right now through portions of Florida. And again, we'll go more in depth on those impacts in the live video tonight, again, 6:45. So again, you don't want to miss that. And again, I'll answer your questions live as well, so that will help a lot there. But NavGem model here, same general idea, develops a storm a little bit further north and kind of brings it right over South Florida as a weak tropical storm. But then hooks it back over the Atlantic and kind of meanders it off the Carolina coastline here for a couple of days. So this is, again, Saturday, Sunday over Florida, and then off the South Carolina coastline Monday morning and Monday afternoon off near Wilmington as a strong tropical storm, borderline hurricane here. And then, again, it hangs around near the Outer Banks for a while before finally getting caught in the flow and strengthening as a hurricane while moving back out to sea. So, again, just another model to show you there. All right, let's take a look at some ensembles, and I'll quickly explain this if you're not quite familiar with what this is. This is really the closest thing to spaghetti models that we have right now, while we still don't have a defined center of circulation. So we'll start with the European ensembles, and basically there are 51 ensemble members that make up the European as a whole, and kind of its big umbrella. Now, the operational run was just kind of one of these ensembles, while the ensembles are a bunch of other different possibilities that the model thinks could happen. And this is straight from this morning. These are the latest runs. Again, within the past hour, these have come out, and you'll notice we've got some pretty big differences. We've got one big camp here that, again, tries to develop this near the Bahamas and then move it up into the southeast coastline. And then we have another area that kind of develops this into the Gulf as a weaker system. So, pretty different outcomes for both here, but I'm going to show you the overnight models here from the European and its ensembles. And you'll notice it looks completely different. So here's last night, here's this morning. Last night, this morning. And I show you that not to say that necessarily what we're seeing right now is a trend back towards the Atlantic, but more or less to show you that the models are just struggling right now. Again, we don't have a defined center of low pressure, so it's going to make a world of difference if low pressure, forms at the surface over the Bahamas compared to just offshore the Keys in that track. Again, if it happens over here near the Bahamas, then it may take this track. If it happens over here, in the Gulf, then it's likely to take the track that most of the models are showing right now. But nothing is completely set in stone yet. Obviously, that is kind of the big theme from the video. If anything, the storm has big-time potential and big-time bust potential as well in either direction. So that's the European. If we take a look at the GFS and its ensemble members, again, a bit of a mess here, but more clustered. Most of the GFS ensemble members say, nope, this is going to wait till the Gulf to develop. and then again kind of meander somewhere in this region, potentially getting back into the Atlantic and potentially being a Carolina problem. In fact, I'll even loop this for you here so you can kind of see the progression here. Again, rides up the east coast of Florida, or excuse me, the west coast of Florida, then meanders somewhere near the Florida Peninsula. Some of the ensemble members, again, get it back into the Atlantic and then loop it back inland here. And again, we'll just watch this one more time here. Up the west coast of Florida, strengthening slowly, and landfall in the Big Bend or Panhandle, then just kind of meandering caught in the flow here, and then finally moving back inland. Now, if this does happen, which again, it's a very real possibility here, if it does happen, then it's gonna really matter how it meanders. Does it meander back out over the Atlantic and then get over the Gulf Stream, have time to re-strengthen, and then hook it back inland? Or does it kind of just meander over South Georgia and the Carolinas and then just bring more of a flooding threat and a bit of a severe weather threat as well? Those are going to be big questions that we need to answer. Now, I'll briefly talk about the steering flow. Why are we, struggling with the storm system? Why do we have so many possibilities? Well, we'll start with the GFS model, and this is Saturday afternoon. I'll go ahead and circle all the players on the field here. Here's the storm, or what would likely be what's trying to form as the center of the storm here near Cuba and the Keys. And then to the north of that, we have a trough. And what's going to happen here is the trough is going to try to pick up this wave or storm, whatever it is at the time, up north towards Florida. And again, that's why a lot of our models are showing landfall here in the Big Bend or the Panhandle. But watch what happens. It does that those blue areas kind of try to connect a little bit. And here's the storm. It gets pulled northward. It makes that landfall sometime Sunday evening. But at this point, the trough is already kind of moving out. And behind it, a bigger area of ridging here is scooting in to take its place. And that's going to block the storm from having an easy shot out. And you see that happen. And then the storm gets kind of caught or stuck here just offshore of the Carolinas. And then again is able to re-strengthen until that ridge once again kind of breaks apart a little bit. And then the storm is able to kind of move back inland. And then again, still stuck meandering, as even if that ridge does break down, there's still not much to move it. In fact, the closest steering current of significance is this trough stuck all the way up into Canada in the northeast, while we just have weak flow over the southeastern United States. So that's why the GFS shows what it shows, and that's why a lot of our models are in that same general idea of a storm moving up through the Gulf and then kind of just getting stuck there. And the European model shows kind of the same thing. It just doesn't really develop the storm so much. So again, Saturday afternoon here's that trough, but you'll notice to the south, not really any storm at all. You're still just a big open wave. So then it doesn't get caught at all. It doesn't even really get pulled north. And then that ridge builds in behind it, and what is still a wave on the European model just gets stuck in the Gulf for a while and meanders there for a good week or so. So either way, confidence is growing that steering currents are going to break down in one way, shape, or form. Now, is it a tropical storm? Is it a hurricane? Is it still just an open wave that gets stuck in that lack of steering current? Is still the big question. And then how does it meander is its own problem to figure out. Does it meander again back east towards the Atlantic and then have a chance to redevelop into something, or does it just meander over land? All those are things we're going to have to find out. And again, we'll find out more throughout the next couple of days, but just know it's still a tough forecast right now. And it's going to continue to be until we get a defined center of low pressure. Now, one thing I do feel pretty confident in right now, nonetheless, is we are going to feel impacts into the Florida Peninsula and portions of the southeast, at the very least in terms of rainfall and rough seas. Rainfall numbers, these are just ensemble numbers. So again, this is kind of an average, but you'll notice someone in Florida is going to get a lot of rain. But I think really the entire peninsula is going to get a heavy helping of rain out of this system. And again, these numbers could be well underdone. We could have spots that outdo this by a lot should we get a storm that just kind of sits there and meanders. Same story for the Carolinas, probably going to get some rain out of this at the very least with that onshore flow. But exactly how much will again depend on where the storm meanders. That's just really going to be a huge key to this forecast and figuring it out. Again, these are the Euro ensembles all put together and put to an average. Look at the GFS, same general idea, a lot of rain for someone in the southeast. And again, we could be looking at a severe weather threat as well. Should this storm have any real defined center of low, that's going to increase that wind shear and up that tornado potential over some areas. And again, it could be a prolonged period of that as well, depending on track here. So again, that's the latest we know with Debbie right now. Still a lot to figure out, absolutely, with that storm. But no, again, we're going to do that for you. We're going to keep watching it. And again, tune in tonight at 6:45 Eastern for an update where I will be taking your questions live and answering them on, again, what will likely become a Debbie this weekend or early next week. All right, now very quickly, ending out the video talking about what's happening back at home currently and some severe weather potential. Again, we've had these ongoing MCSs or mesoscale convective systems working across much of the central part of the country, all due to this big ring of fire that we've been talking about. And again, I'm not going to talk this to death because it's the same thing today I've been saying the past couple of days. Nothing has really changed. Waves of these showers and storms are going to continue to work on through, as we're already seeing today through portions of the Midwest and as we have seen the past couple of days. Now, another thing to kind of keep an eye on is the heat today. It is going to be hot. Heat advisories along the I-95 corridor from Boston all the way down towards the Florida Keys. You could drive that entire distance and not leave a heat advisory. But really, just about all the South is under that same concern. In fact, excessive heat warnings in those pinkish purplish areas up the Mississippi River Valley, including Paducah, Kentucky, St. Louis, Memphis, and even back towards Little Rock and Oklahoma City as well, having that excessive heat concern. Also, a small flooding threat in some areas just due to all of the storms we've had over the past week. Again, that will be something to watch out for. Now, severe weather threat today, anywhere in this green or yellow area has a threat of some strong straight line winds and some hail as well, and cannot rule out an isolated tornado, especially in that yellow area. But that's today's severe weather threat. Again, it's going to be more of the same. It's going to be scattered. Not everyone's going to see rain, but if you do, it could become strong there in some of those storms. Same story for tomorrow. That threat shifts off towards the mid-Atlantic and the Ohio River Valley. And then eventually for our Saturday, again through the mid-Atlantic and portions of the southeast under that severe weather threat. Main threat all days, though, will be strong straight line winds, some small hail, and a non-zero threat at a tornado, meaning it's not likely, but cannot completely rule it out. All right. I'm going to just show you one model here. This is the NAM, and again, I put this at a lower resolution because I think putting it at high resolution, people probably read a little bit too much into the fine details. Also, this is going to go out a little bit further and kind of bring what would be Debbie into the picture just a little bit here, which I think is important for that forecast as well. So this afternoon, again, same general idea, rounds of storms working on through the Midwest. In fact, we've got that one complex already towards Illinois and Indiana. Could be a concern, but anybody, again, in that severe weather threat today could see strong storms even into this evening, specifically a hot spot kind of here through the Ohio River Valley and portions of the Midwest. Now, we bring this into tomorrow, Friday, August 2nd. Again, that threat area shifting off east a little bit, but again, here we go. Notice these storms firing up in that threat area for tomorrow, anywhere from the Carolinas up through portions of the Northeast back towards the Ohio River Valley. Could see a couple strong to severe storms, absolutely. And then we get this into our Saturday, and that threat level is going to increase once more or shift towards the mid-Atlantic from Georgia up through the Carolinas, Virginia, up towards the I-95 corridor from D.C. up through Philadelphia and New York City. And at the same time, look at the bottom of your screen. Here's that tropical wave getting into the Gulf. And then eventually, Saturday and into Sunday, there it goes developing there for these final frames. And I think this is a relatively realistic idea for Saturday and Sunday. You'll notice widespread rainfall could be a concern here through the Florida Peninsula as this wave or storm or depression, again, whatever it is, tries to get its act together here and increases that onshore flow and just brings a whole lot of precipitable water with it. So again, I think that does a pretty good job at showing the severe weather currently and how that will evolve with, again, potential Debbie here on down the road. But again, if you have any comments, definitely ask me in the in the comments section. Also, subscribe if you haven't already and like the video. And again, don't forget 6:45 tonight. We will have a live stream. And if you tuned into yesterday's, I know it was a little choppy. I messed with the settings. I found out what the problem was, and I fixed it. So it should be good to go today for a cleaner, nicer experience. But with that said, y'all have a wonderful rest of your first day of August. Enjoy it. Start the month off on the right foot, and I'll see you all tonight.